Each year, Canadians have some 5 million encounters with police, officers who serve, protect, and in rare cases, the encounter turns deadly. But there has been no national accounting of how it happens or how often until now. CBC News has spent 6 months poring over records of fatal interactions with police from across the country, spanning nearly 20 years. A number of trends emerge, but above all, one thing is clear: the rate is rising. Here's our senior investigative correspondent, Diana Swain, with more on what she found on the use of deadly force.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now!
Bo Baker's friends and family gather to remember him every year and to press for answers about the night he was shot dead by police 3 years ago in Kitchener.
It's not, bad guys that are being killed by police. The vast majority of them are mentally ill. Oh, boy.
Have you been here?
I came once to visit my friend here, and I couldn't come back.
His mother, Jackie, still can't understand why police shot him outside his apartment building.
So, yeah, this is where it happened.
She says police already knew about her son's history of mental illness when he threatened a 911 operator that he would hurt himself or someone else.
He was standing here when he was killed.
Police say he had a beer in one hand, a knife in the other when they arrived. Less than 2 minutes later, Baker was on the ground, dying, shot 3 times.
People like Bo and others who have died this way with mental health issues should not die so easily.
CBC News has compiled data showing there have been 460 cases of people who've died in interactions with police from 2000 to the end of last year, either from a police bullet, a beating, or even from cardiac arrest during an incident. Drilling into the data reveals the number has risen in the past few years, and nearly half of those who died, like Baker, showed signs of mental health issues. Add in those who had drugs or alcohol in their system, and it reveals roughly 3/4 of those killed were compromised in some way during their confrontation with police.
Very often they're terrified, they're scared.
Dorothy Cotton is a forensic psychologist. She says it's key to remember that someone in crisis is also likely afraid of what's unfolding.
They're going to respond the way any of us do when we're scared. So part of it is really to make them feel safe, to make them try and get across a message that, you're not there to cause trouble, you're there to calm things down.
The data reveals something else. The person who died was usually armed with an object of some kind, such as a knife. But about 1/4 of the time, they had a gun. And 1/4 of the time, they had no weapon at all. Police on the front lines believe too few resources for people in crisis too often leaves police choosing between their own safety and the person facing them.
You don't have time to, take a time out and pull out a playbook. You need to respond quickly to whatever you're confronted with.
Well, he bought it at a little kiosk downtown.
An independent investigation determined Baker's shooting was justified because the officer felt he was in danger. But a coroner's inquest will be held into what happened and what could be learned from it.
I still have his little Spider-Man hat.
His mother hopes that means the boy who once dreamed of being a superhero can still be one.
He wanted to be a hero in life, and I think with his story being told that he can finally be a hero in a little way, help make some positive change in maybe the way the police interact with people with mental illness.
And Diana's in our Toronto studio tonight. We know, Diana, that when it comes to fatal interactions with police in the United States, ethnicity often becomes a big issue. So what do the numbers show here in Canada?
Well, the overall data shows that the typical person who died in this way was a white male in his mid-30s. But when you drill down further and look at specific parts of the country, the picture changes. In Toronto, for instance, the proportion of the population that's Black is about 8%, but about 36%, or 1 in 3 people who died in these fatal encounters in Toronto, was Black. In Winnipeg, an even sharper contrast. About 10% of the population there is Indigenous, but 64% of those who died in a confrontation with police were Indigenous. But no matter where you live in this country, knowing now what the numbers are gives people a chance to talk about ways to bring them down, Ian.
All right, Diana, thank you.
Thank you.
How to bring those numbers down? Police, politicians, and the public have been trying to address that question for years, a question that gets more urgent every time these tragedies strike. After the fatal moments, the flashing lights, and the police tape come the questions.
Alberta's police watchdog is now investigating.
The review will start soon and take a year to complete.
A panel of jury members will come up with a series of recommendations to try to prevent these kinds of deaths from happening in the future.
We looked at more than a dozen inquiries and reviews from the past few years and found recurring themes: that police needed to address race relations and bias, that officers needed better training and support to recognize and respond to people with addiction and mental health issues, and of course,
de-escalation is really, really important.
De-escalation or defusing of a situation
could have been used to de-escalate the situation.
the need for better training to de-escalate volatile situations and avoid lethal force. But these recommendations came up so often, an increasingly urgent question is how they're actually being implemented.